Gregory, thank you for inviting me to your home.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
This is wonderful. I was looking back at my records. We've known each other now for almost exactly 13 years.
Yes. Doesn't feel that long, but certainly.
It's been a journey for those 13 years.
Journey, yes.
Yes. We are different, even though we're different sides of the table, we're different. We're in the same industry, but we are completely different mind frames of creative versus technical.
Right.
And so then that's how we met. So with that personal relationship, I always love to ask people, what defines you, Gregory?
Well, I think that I'm defined by, or maybe compelled by, a need to tell stories, really, if I think about it. Like, because my pictures and the way I make them seem to me about, in the end, they're really about attempting to try to tell a story through using a kind of deep sense of the unknowable things that define anyone. You know, our obsessions, our fears, our anxieties, our desires, and then trying to shape that into a visual form, and then using, obviously, the tradition of the medium to do so. My preoccupation is attempting to tell the story in pictures, but never knowing quite how it all adds up. You know, it always remains something of a mystery, and that's what pushes you forward.
At what age did you know that this was the right medium for you?
Well, I think my earliest indication that I love photography, it came when I believe when I was like 13 years old, when my father, for some unknowable reason, brought us to the Diane Arbus retrospective at Museum of Modern Art. I was captivated by the pictures, and even now when I look at a Diane Arbus, I look at it with a kind of sense of fear and mystery, and or almost as if looking through the eyes of a child. But that was the first moment when I just realized the urgency that a photograph can have, like the power that a photograph could tell a story that could accommodate someone's obsessions. And so that was the first time I was like aware of the power of pictures. But I didn't really start taking pictures until much later, when I was an undergraduate at SUNY Purchase.
Now, you were going to SUNY Purchase. You were already studying a Bachelor's of Arts. Was it not in photography?
I was originally, my father's a psychoanalyst, and my original impulse was to like follow in his footsteps, and it was always interested me what he did. He had his office in the basement of our house in Park Slope in Brooklyn, and one of my earliest defining memories was listening to the floorboards, trying to hear the sessions underneath the living room floor into the basement. Academia was always really difficult for me. I was dyslexic and very active reading and taking tests, and general kind of academia was almost painful for me. And then I wound up taking a Photo 1 class with Laurie Simmons, and I don't know, like when the one of the first pictures I ever made, and it was in the developer, and the image appeared, and I was enchanted, but I also felt like this is something I can understand. You know, a still image that has no before or after. There's it's not linear in any way. It's a frozen moment. That's how I feel like I understand the world. You know, like it felt like it was very connected to the way I think. From that moment on, that's when I just knew that like I was going to be a photographer.
You changed your major at SUNY Purchase?
Yeah, I had this weird major there where it was like a combination of photography, film theory, and American literature. It was like a created major.
No kidding.
And all those things play in my
They
work,
do.
you know. The film classes that I took, you know, film studies, explored Hitchcock and horror films and 1950s melodramas, just like general history of film, was so, it shaped me really profoundly. So I loved movies, but I thought like a photographer. So the American literature also had an aspect of like, you know, the literary imagination. So somehow it brought all those things together in my work.
But right from the beginning, the combination of your love of those movies, but wanting to create a still, you were already there.
Yeah.
In SUNY Purchase.
From day one almost, like if you went back and look at my work as an undergraduate and then later on as a graduate student, I was really interested in trying to use cinematic lighting and movie technique to try to tell a story in a still image. And that has sort of continued on all the way through. You know, at that time it was like a very kind of organic and very simple way. But I always say that every artist has like one story to tell, one central story, and you spend a lifetime kind of circling around that story over and over again, reinventing it to a certain extent, trying to change the form of it, but like in the end, it's the core remains the same. It's the same preoccupations, the same. You're compelled by the kind of the central issues.
Then you went to school in Yale, and
Yeah.
you got your Master's of Fine Art at Yale.
Yeah.
Your parents had a cabin up in Lee,
Yes.
and from Yale to Lee, it brought you back here.
Yeah.
And since then, you've been trying to tell that same story
Yeah.
that you're discussing there.
Yes. In retrospect, it all makes sense, but at the time, it's, you know, much more chaotic and sort of fragmented kind of evolution. You know, I'm often asked, like, why do you keep coming back to the same towns over and over again? And I don't really have a real answer for that, but I just feel like I'm an artist that like is defined by a certain location, certain setting, certain geography. There are other kinds of photographers who travel, who like have a kind of more kind of exploratory mode. I'm really interested in staying in one place and going deeper and deeper. This has just become the place where I make pictures.
This is you. No, this area. When I think of you, I think of two words jump to my mind: genuine and
Yeah.
authentic.
Yes.
You show an authentic side of this area that's
Yeah.
not seen in most imagery. When I think of New England, and when I come home to New England, people have an imagery of Norman Rockwell, right, and you know, rolling hills and maple trees, and you show a different side of here.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Norman Rockwell because I do feel like an association with him in a certain way because there are some similarities. We both, you know, worked in a similar terrain. We both have a kind of fictionalizing approach to everyday life. We both use characters or from the community. It's just that his pictures attempted to like create a kind of utopic vision of American life, and you know, mine's sort of, I think, darker in a way, or you know, I relate to his sort of obsessive nature too.
He's telling a story. You're telling a story.
Yeah.
I'd say darker in a way is darker in an extreme way over Norman Rockwell.
Yeah. Well, people have. Somebody once said like I'm like Norman Rockwell meets Norman Bates, kind of like
perfect.
that. Yeah.
That's perfect. So let's go on further with that. So this is my home, and I relate really well to the imagery. because I have friends and family, and then I see in your imagery the tension that's built is maybe a broken dream, maybe a bad decision, maybe a tension that you really might not want to be comfortable with.
Right. You know, my first and foremost intention is always to try and make a beautiful picture. That's absolutely pictorially, like the setting, the light, the atmosphere, the mood, all of that, like it needs to pick, the formal elements has to be bring you in. But then I want something to complicate it, like something to undermine it in a way or disturb it to find. And that part of it is like, I feel like it's less conscious. It's like that's the murky part of the work that like I can't really define exactly. I mean, I know certain elements, like I know I'm really interested in some sense of dislocation, some sense of alienation, loneliness. And I do feel that photography in general has a deep correlation to being alone. And that's kind of a paradox for me because like I work with so many people, but like in the end, it is a lonely endeavor. Like, you know, the whole process for me always starts with me just like location scanning on my own, and there's always a slight alienation from me in terms of the world that I'm creating. And so I think that's amplified in the work. You know, that's like a theme in the work, like separation.
You find the location first, and then you build upon that location. How do you decide what goes into which location?
Well, for me, it's all comes down to location. Like that's like key. So before we start a production, I spend months like looking, driving around, finding locations, and then a slow process of like, what's happening here, you know? And I want it to be almost nothing, you know, like there's not much literally happening in my pictures. It's the smallest gesture, but it's amplified through light and mood and atmosphere, all that. But it always starts with location, and then somehow I just build the story, and then I work with Julianne, my partner, to write a kind of short description of the picture, and then as we're going into production, more and more people become involved. Most keyly is my director of photography, Rick Sands, who I've been working with for like many, many years, over 25 maybe. So that's part of how the pictures come together, is like my kind of vision and his like lighting.
I've always been impressed with that it's only been 13 years, but it's Rick and Dan. You've got the same crew, and you're staying also 25 years. So from Hover on, you've had this relatively the same crew with you.
You know, people come on board for different projects, but the core group remains the same, and that's really important because then you don't have to, there's a shorthand that you have when you're working with people for long periods of time, and you don't really have to have a lot of conversation about what needs to happen. Yeah, I know them and they know me, so like...
And that trust.
Yes, yeah. That's, I think, part of the magic of the whole process, working with that same group over and over again, and then by extension, working with the towns and the people in the neighborhood and the businesses and the various administrations of the towns, like the fire departments, and, you know, it takes so many people to like activate the whole thing.
On set yesterday, I was talking to the policeman.
Yes.
And he said he's worked with you 3 times.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so there is not even just your crew, but even the local policeman.
Yeah.
You know, I've worked on this picture and that picture. That was wonderful.
Well, we depend on all those, like everyone, because like, you know, we have to close streets down, and we have to like clear traffic, and we have to like wet down the streets, and all these things, you know, it would be impossible to do without the cooperation of many, many people.
I have a lot of clients who are artists, but there's a jump to go from artist to fine artist.
Right.
What kind of advice would you give them?
I think there's only really one word of advice I would give, and that's be true to yourself and your story and your vision. It's the only thing an artist truly has, is their particular view of the world. When you're working commercially or in the service of something other than yourself, your job is to make pictures for something outside yourself, bring your own way of your sensibility and everything. But like with an artist, it's really the only thing you have is your story and the form of the pictures. So you have to do everything you can to protect that, really, and to be honest with it and try to make it mean something that feels personal, you know. That's the sort of the interesting dance between form and content, really, is like bringing out all of that kind of murky story out into a kind of visual language. And then you have it, and that's the thing, you know. And then try to do that over a lifetime, you know, like try to push it forward and keep it truthful and not be overly concerned with all the other things in the world that like are like pushing up against it, or there's so many different ways that like you could be sidetracked as an artist.
Sure.
You know, so you have to hold on to that, and that's becoming more and more complicated, I think. It's really interesting. Photography is on a very sort of really interesting point where I would say that like it's never been more omnipresent with like social media and screens and Instagram and so like photography is like so democratic in a certain way that everyone is now almost by definition a photographer.
Everybody has a camera in their pocket.
Everyone has a camera in their pocket. Well, that's the thing. Mm-hmm. So how do you as an artist use the medium to say something that has longevity, you know, and the very act of making a picture that's on a wall, mm-hmm. like a physical object. It's not how most people see pictures, you know, and I include myself in that. Like, I take pictures with my phone and I'm on social media and all that, but like there is a difference in the end, but it's become even more of a challenge as photography has become more omnipresent in our culture. The stakes are even higher, I think. It makes the challenge worth it.
As the viewer, though, I've seen you being this creative process and expanding it and doing what you're doing today. You are already telling a story such a long time ago before we had a camera in our pocket.
Yes.
But I think what you said is significant with the still image and the strength of the still image. When I look at your imagery, I'm bringing my personal view into the tension you're creating, and creating my own narrative from it.
Yeah.
Whereas motion, you're telling the story and giving them your narrative almost. Right. And so that to me is where the still will always be around.
Right.
Because of bringing that, you're letting me choose my narrative for your work.
Right.
And I'm staring at it longer. I'm being in it more. And it's not where I've seen some movies that don't hold over time.
Yeah.
The stills is going to be there.
Or not. You know, that's the thing. It's like photography has a very unusual relationship, I think, to other mediums, you know, that are other narrative forms, in that it is frozen. For every way that my pictures reference movies, they're not movies. You know, there's no plot, there's no, you know, dialogue, there's no sound, there's no movement, there's no before, there's no after. It's just the frozen moment. And that limitation, I think, is part of the power of photography generally, where, as you say, the viewer can bring their own story to it. One of the things I love about a still image is that it suggests more questions than answers in the end.
In the fine art world,
yeah,
you are not using silver halide process on the front end now.
Yeah.
And you're not using silver halide process on the back end.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter.
No. I mean, I don't think any of it matters in the end. All of it are tools to find the thing that means something, you know. And as technology changes, they're all ways of like getting to that thing, you know, the thing that means something. And, you know, technology will change yet again. But your vision is the thing that's important, you know, and everything else are tools to capture that.
So when you're on set, though, you have a production crew. You are using words from motion.
Yeah.
You don't call them models, you call them actors.
Yeah.
Right. So every part of, other than audio, is a production set for motion and audio. Is there a next step, or are you going to stay still, or are you going to do motion?
There was a lot of discussion about me doing a movie, and it's an interesting idea, but like in the end, I can honestly say I think in terms of still photographs, and I don't even know if I can make a movie because like I'm so invested in the still image, and it's hard enough already just like to try to make a still picture that I could stand behind, and even the idea of moving the camera even 1 inch or another is like terrifying to me anyway, so.
So using the XT system, it's been really nice, especially having the movements on the back of the camera. We've been shooting everything tethered through Ethernet, which has been super stable. It's great that it charges the camera while you shoot. Being able to control the camera fully from the computer is really nice because our shooting windows at Twilight, the ambient light is constantly getting darker and darker, so our exposures are getting longer and longer. So we're able to change that really quickly without touching the camera, without worrying about moving the camera position at all, which gives us a ton of control.
Dan, I need to know what do you do with Hover and Gregory Crewdson Productions?
Well, my sort of official title is camera operator, which is really kind of pulled from the film world, but I've, you know, for most of the time that I've worked with Greg, I've been the guy behind the camera, be it, you know, an 8x10 or one of these lovely ladies.
And you've worked with Greg for how long?
I think the first year I worked with him was 95 or 96. And we started real small, just Greg and I and maybe one or two other people, and then things kind of, you know, built up.
And it's not small anymore.
No, it's not small anymore. That's true. What do we have? 25, 30 people on this. This was actually smaller than some of the previous shoots, crew-wise.
So we met about 13 years ago.
Yes.
And so you were the 8x10 film shooter, the cameraman that had to take all that responsibility of loading and pulling and controlling the film. What has it been like going from 8x10 film to digital?
Incredible, actually. I mean, in so many ways, you know, the first and most obvious thing about film is, you know, you don't see what you're getting. I mean, we did shoot black and white Polaroid, but short of that, you know, we had to shoot all this film and ship it off via FedEx, you know, cross our fingers and pray. And we would get confirmation from the lab, you know, a few days later that there were, you know, the images were there and, you know, everything worked. But having a system like this, and specifically this system with the level of resolution, has just been fantastic because it gives us instant confirmation. The way that we work is kind of much more akin to motion picture than still in terms of all the lighting. And so there's a lot of stuff, a lot of detail, a lot of things to be checking in the frame, and having the ability to zoom in at very high resolution and look at stuff is incredibly helpful, you know, knowing what you're getting as you're getting it.
When I see an image like this and I can see all the different variables that you're lighting at the same time, I would think Shooting digital, you can see each one. You can see how that light is affecting that one area where you couldn't see that before as easily.
No.
Would you pull a Polaroid in each light set?
No, we would usually pull a Polaroid towards the end to check overall. Sometimes earlier to check positioning of various things, but this absolutely allows us to check every individual thing.
It was Rick with his meter. He would be metering it from the back and metering it
exactly.
at the end.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really great about this system and Capture One is it gives Greg the ability to direct and punch in on the actors and see them on a monitor, at a resolution and size that he can direct them at. In other words, you can see their emotions really clearly instead of trying to look at them from 75 or 100 feet away. And I think that part of the process is really vital too.
How difficult was that before? Because on a subject matter like this, you're a huge distance from the actor, and yet the nuances of the expression and the angle of the head and the eyes. How was Greg able to do it before compared to now? It seems like it's so much easier.
It's a completely different process. He would walk into the picture and go up to the actor and literally physically direct them. Turn your head. He would move their body a little bit. Give them an eye line or something like that, and then walk back out. This enables us to do it in a way more efficient manner. They'll often have either someone near them on a walkie, or we can even put a walkie out of frame near them, and they can listen to the direction coming from camera, and there's no more walking in and out and all that stuff.
When you first made that transition, again about 13 years ago, we went to a P65.
Right.
So we are at a 60 megapixel resolution, going from 8x10 to 60 megapixel. What were the nerves? What was it feeling like? Was this going to achieve what you needed to? Did you wait for certain technology to happen before you made the jump?
Gregory had expressed interest in shifting to digital for some time before we did. And the first job that we used that system on was in Italy, if you remember. I remember we spent a lot of time, you and I and Greg, talking about road cases and how we're going to get everything over there, and computers, and then
we had that big rolling G4 case.
Which I think we never even used it. It stayed in the office.
Studio.
Yeah. I think that there was a combination of things going on at that time. I think Greg was interested in embracing a newer technology, and also in making the process easier and kind of streamlining it. Again, coming back to the whole idea of confirmation and knowing what you're getting is huge, right? There's anxiety and spending all this time and money and effort to shoot something, and then wondering and waiting and really not knowing about the results you're getting. And I think at that point, it felt like the technology digitally, certainly from phase one, was going to be on par with 8x10. Or potentially better.
We were close. I would tell you, I always used you as a litmus test. As if Gregory says that he's getting the quality he was getting before, then who am I to make any other judgments, right? There were lots of questions, whether 60 or 80 or where we hit that 8x10 threshold. But when Gregory said, let me tell you what I'm getting now versus what I was getting before. Let me look at the shadow detail that I'm getting now versus what I was getting before. I remember specifically him telling me that the passes or the focus stacks, what you went from before to now with digital, that you could cut it in half.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the process that you saved, and like you said, the anxiety, I mean, it was a completely different process.
Yeah. And given the fact that, 8x10 has really shallow depth of field, as you know. So by going to medium format, we increased that. So that alone was really helpful. And I think the Italian job, quote unquote,
the Italian job,
was a great way to sort of start using this too, because that work was mostly, if almost entirely, available light. So it kind of got us to sort of ease into this system.
That was in 2009.
Yeah.
Since then, we're talking 60, 80 megapixel, 80 megapixel, 100 megapixel for Moth was 100 megapixel.
Right.
Now we're doing 150. We're able to capture. So you had the IQ4 on this new set of work. Talk to me about any kind of differences.
The first difference that really comes to mind for me, and I mean, as you know, from coming to the set and from talking to us, the live view is a big deal, and that's what we're using for punching in, for all the actors, everything that we just discussed. The live view was not great at all initially. That was kind of a failing, and that has steadily improved to where on this the live view is fantastic. Right there, when we punch in live view, it really looks great. So first and foremost, from my point of view, in the actual production phase, that was a huge benefit. To have this system with the Rodenstock, where we had the Rodenstock lenses earlier, but they were basically just 4x5 lenses. To have this system with the electronic shutter and this whole complete system just worked flawlessly. It was really, really great.
Yeah, you were copal shutter before, where you were cocking.
Right, exactly. So it was very manual. It was almost akin to shooting 4x5, minus the film obviously and everything else. But so I would say that the last on Eclipse of Moths, we had the phase 1 actual body, right? With the viewfinder.
An XF.
Yeah. And I think while it was nice to have the viewfinder, I would say that the benefits of having the movements on here, the shift and rise and fall, far outweighed that. Plus, according to you, these lenses are better. So.
Well, you haven't seen the results completely yet. When we see it this big, we'll see.
Yeah.
That's great. To me, it was seamless. To me, on set this time, the camera was absolutely secondary. You didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
We were watching production happen on multiple monitors. You increase the monitors that you've had in the past.
Yep.
Everyone's watching. Everyone's a part of it. And the camera was just there.
Yeah.
And it was so nice that you didn't have to think about it.
That's a really good point, actually, that the camera itself becomes kind of transparent. And you can see on our sets that there's a lot going on. There's people kind of going in and out, and a lot of last minute lighting changes, and positioning going on, and wet downs, and there's all this stuff. It's kind of comes up to this sort of crescendo, and then we start shooting, and it just sort of settles out. But that's true. The camera is what you want is for the camera to be seamless and not to get in the way of anything. And that was absolutely the case for this.
So you had 5 weeks of production, I think 25 days of shooting, and 19 images on this body of work?
Correct. Yeah, sounds right.
I only received one phone call. That's it. One phone call from the beginning with a question, not a troubleshooting or tech support. I was worried, but I knew that if you weren't calling, then it was working.
Yeah, I think Zach called you once with a question, right? And I called you, and then you called me back, and I never called you back. So it was just a minor thing So we had absolutely zero issues with the camera. The questions we were having is that because we were using live view so much, the back was getting really warm, and you had warned us about that and told us not to do that, and we did it anyway because that's what we do. And and we were just kind of thinking, how can we solve this? And we were going to ask you to just give us a second back so we could have a cold back and we could switch backs and stuff like that. Not really. So no, absolutely flawless. There were no issues with the camera whatsoever. That says a lot, I think.
I think it's significant.
Yeah,
it's significant. Also knowing how Gregory feels about creating. He's creating. He's not. This doesn't matter to him. No.
And what you said earlier is he's very appreciative of what technology can offer, but if he doesn't want it to get in the way at all. And so this system in that regard is spot on. Didn't get in the way, did its job perfectly.
So if they had 200 megapixels, would you want it?
Oh yeah. I'm thinking, bigger is better.
Yeah, when you walk up to this print, you can look through the window and see a box fan inside the window and see the actual lines and tiles on the box fan.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And I would assume that's what the people are going to do in the museums, right? That's what they're going to do. They're going to come up and want to pick it apart, and they can't.
Yeah. Well, I think, you and I were discussing off camera earlier about this, that when people look at pictures this big in a gallery or in a museum, I think they tend to walk right up to them and scrutinize them for detail. And let's face it, most of the time when you walk right up to a print this big, it falls apart.
It does.
It just kind of mushes out, to some degree. But these prints don't do that at all, and there's enormous attention to detail in all of Gregory's work, intentionally, and so that detail is available to the viewer. But at the same time, when you step back from a print this size, 25, 35, 40 feet, you get the effect of a window, looking into a window into a world, and so I feel like this system gives the ability to create images like that no other system that I know of can do.
This is his work, right? He creates this window into an environment, and you can look at it and then walk into the environment.
Exactly.
So to me, having that detail and that quality, people walk in, it to me is the right fit.
Yeah,
absolutely right fit.
And I would add that the detail in all the images is, an integral part of the storytelling, all those details, because when people walk up and look at the images and then get close and look at all these details, and you can overhear them talking about it, and that helps to build the narrative of the image, I think, really effectively. And if that detail wasn't there, or it didn't have the resolution, and they couldn't go up and scrutinize it and see all that stuff, it wouldn't have the same effect.
Completely agree. It's been a pleasure working with you, sir.
Likewise.
I'm glad the project went really well, and I'm ready for you guys ready to shoot the next one.
Yeah, well, we can't wait, definitely. And again, we thank you for your support. We know you're behind us 100%, and that is great for us. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we just finished. This is a wrap of, I think, is it 19 images?
20.
20 images.
Yeah.
Almost 5 weeks of production.
Yeah.
Why so many in such a short period of time? How was it? How good does it feel to have that over with?
Yeah. Well, it's always, you finish a production with like a combination of like relief, but also sadness, because it's such an intense and exhausted period of time. But really the only way I know how to make a body of work is like in this way of bringing the whole production team together, and the only way to do that even in a practical sense is to do it in a short period of time, like a movie. So I work very closely with the line producer, and we map out a schedule and a budget for like making 20 pictures over a short period of time. We do our best to like make one picture every day or every other day. We have days off, We have it's very scheduled with 12-hour days, and it's really the only way to do it for me.
It's investment.
Yeah, it's the only way to do it.
The team is invested.
Yeah,
It's a tight-knit crew.
Yeah, and then that becomes like a family, and it becomes very, we're all in it together, and in a way it's like a movie in terms of the schedule, but in a way it's not, because our only goal is to try to make a single picture, each day. We don't have to, there's no coverage, there's no shooting different scenes like a movie, We build starting throughout the full day, sometimes 2 days, prepping, and then there's a very short period of time where it all comes together, which is in twilight, when my lights and the ambient light of the sun, it all comes together.
And typically that is when you're capturing. It's production, and then typically a twilight capture.
It has to be, really, because, it's just the only time when our lights work, in combination with the ambient sun. There's a very short window where it all feels okay, this is the magic hour where it could all happen. And if you don't get it, you don't get it.
So I just spent some time with Dan today, and we talked about that transition of going from the 8x10 film world over to digital.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of changes on set.
Yes.
But now you get to see everything happening. It changes the production tremendously. Even from the last 13 years we've worked together, I see how that's progressed and how your shooting is different. Can you talk to me how that has changed?
Certain things remain the same, that we're just interested in one frame. The camera never moves, but the whole process has changed enormously. When we used to shoot with the 8x10, it was a more kind of cumbersome process. I used to say you live and die by the 8x10, basically. So we would shoot many sheets of 8x10, different exposures, different lighting setups,
and focal
lengths, hundreds, sometimes 40, 50, 60 different sheets of film. And then we'd develop all that film, and then make contacts, and then composite certain elements of the pictures.
Would you scan all 60 per shot?
No.
Would you contact sheets then would scan the ones you needed from the contact sheets?
So it was very labor intensive, very expensive. And the other thing is we never could see the image on set.
When you're looking at your prints, you're walking into them and seeing the detail that you chose to put there.
Yes.
And often it takes me a little bit to go, oh, this is lit over here.
Yeah.
You wanted me to see this to put this together.
Right.
So has that helped? I mean, on set yesterday, you were zooming in to the model's face, and you were able to see that model's face and to say a little bit down.
Yeah, the whole thing's very different. We'd look at screens, each of us have our own screen, and we're sort of trying to see the very small differences. In that way, it's can't even compare the experiences of shooting analog and digital. So it's a real control thing too, in terms of we could, particularly when you're using enormous amount of lights, and we could see what's too hot, what's has to come down, all those things.
Yeah, right away.
Yeah. In real time.
In real time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we went with a phase 1 60 megapixel to begin with on a view camera, right?
Yes.
You went from large view camera to small view camera,
yes.
right? The modern view camera, and then all the way from the progression of resolution to 150 megapixel.
Yes.
Today, with another modern view camera on this body of work. That's what I noticed that was different this time over others. Is that with the 150, we could zoom in and see that detail and change it right away. And you were watching that detail happen.
That's right.
That's right. To change it. So my assumption would be that you would want as much resolution as you can have.
Yes, absolutely. And it's it definitely has changed the process, and particularly with Rick, who's lighting it, Zach, who's managing the files, and Dan, who's moderating the camera. So what I'm really interested in is seeing the thing, you know? Like, to me, the camera is like the conduit into sort of that's the thing that, like...
I've heard you call it a burden.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The camera's the burden.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw yesterday that
Yeah.
was gone.
Yeah.
Because of the process changing,
Yeah.
you're looking at the monitor and the camera's...
Yes,
For
almost invisible.
It was gone for 19 shots over 25 days of shooting in almost 5 weeks.
Yeah.
I have, one phone call for tech support.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, to me, that burden was gone yesterday.
I
Right?
don't think I touched the camera once.
Yeah. It was...
I didn't touch it.
You created, but to me, it helps your creation process.
Yes.
What I saw yesterday compared to where
Yeah.
the burden was delivered,
Yes.
and you're feeling emotion with the actor.
Yes.
You're getting a connection and it's just a secondary
Yeah.
part.
I guess it's very akin to being a director in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I'm sort of first and foremost trying to like get that vision that was in my head to see it in front of me and then captured by the camera. And it's amazing how often that actually happens. Like, there's that moment when it just like transforms and you used to see it in front of your eyes, and that's to me the magical moment where it all comes together.
Well, we walked up to your print on the wall at, I think it's 8 feet wide,
Yeah.
and we were able to look through the window, see details of subject matter through the window,
Yeah.
and the viewer can walk into your subject matter.
Right, right,
That combination of the technology and your creative,
right.
to me, that print displayed it beautifully.
Yeah. Well, I want the image to feel like it's a world that a viewer could just walk into, and I don't want them to be aware of what went into the process of
Sure.
making it. You know, I just want the viewer to just fall into the fiction of the picture, or the world of the picture.
I asked Medium Format Magazine to give me some questions they might want.
Yeah, yeah.
So what truth do you know today in photography that might not have been your truth back then?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because like the whole notion of truth in photography is like a contested one, right? So there is the objective truth of like, there's a relationship between the camera and the subject, and then there is what I would call the more poetic truth, and that's the thing I'm interested in, because like in the end the camera is recording something that is like mechanical and technical. That's less interesting to me than the kind of poetic truth of trying to uncover something that feels real and make it into something that means something. And that's what I'm interested in. Like, it's a paradox really, because I'm using a lot of like artifice. I'm using a lot of like lighting and fog machines and interventions of different kinds. But all of that's in an effort to try and find something that feels truthful to me, you know, truthful about the medium of photography, you know, that like in the end, the thing I'm looking for is photographic, you know. It's different from everything else in the world, you know. A still photograph is different from a movie. It's different from any other kind of visual forms. And I love the connection to, I don't think my pictures would read the same way if they're like highly realistic paintings. That there has to be that exchange between the camera and something that actually happened in front of you. That's important, you know, that actually happened, you know. I mean, it was staged and it's lit but it's actually happened, you know. That's so important.
Gregory?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for being a great client
Yeah.
over the 13 years.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting us to your home. Thank you for this just authentic conversation.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. Great questions too.
Very much. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm glad we did it, and boy, that means we're definitely finished the whole cycle. Remember when we were out there like doing the tests?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I was like so
Were you
nervous.
worried?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, I was. I was like, do we use the black and white back, or do we use, you know, all those things were like.
Yeah, with Black and White Project, am I shooting black and white, or am I going to create color?
Yes.
Talking to the guys on set.
Everyone, it was like, we made the right decision. Yeah, definitely.
We had no idea beforehand, but we got to the right place. Whew. Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.